Hi everyone, my name is Natalie. Today I wanted to do a book tag, and specifically the Nature Writing Naturally book tag, which Emma and I created as a tag to go along with the SpringAthon. These are all related to nature writing, so let's just get into the questions. So the first question is, favorite nature writer or book? I think this is probably my favorite nature book, and also very possibly my favorite nature writer, and that is The Great Soul of Siberia, In Search of the Elusive Siberian Tiger by Sooyoung Park. This is a South Korean author as well as a scientist. So he spends half of his year in an underground bunker to study the Siberian tiger up close, and he talks about what he's learning as he does his research, but also the rest of the year he follows like their trails and things like that. So his year is basically divided into different aspects of his research on the Siberian tiger. So I think that this is both really interesting, clearly someone who knows their subject well and has such a passion for it that it's become his sort of life purpose. It's such a big part of his life, daily life and work. But also I think he is a really good writer, and he is actually coming up with a sequel to this book that was supposed to be published this year. I think it will probably come out next year. As soon as it gets a set release date, I will be pre-ordering it because, as I said, I love this book and I would highly recommend it to anyone. I think it is beautiful and poignant and insightful, all things that I like in nature writing. Next few questions are related to the prompts. So first is recommend a plant related book, and for that I have chosen Cabin Born. Inspiration for Your Quiet Place Somewhere, edited by Zach Klein. So this is basically people who have built houses or cabins in the middle of the woods or just surrounded by nature in quite wild landscapes often. It's basically a photography book, so it has photographs like this and like this. It's divided into various sections. Some of them are to do with using the material that is already available and making it into something new. So it's sort of a combination of nature and architecture, this book. And I mean, it has a lot of stunning nature photography in it, and dreamy settings. I love this. There's several stories about the people who live in these houses or have built them, and sort of what inspired them to create these things. I take every opportunity to recommend it because I think people who find the idea of living in a cabin in the woods, I think, will appreciate this as a way to inspire you for a future house, or generally to just sort of be armchair traveling. And there's also a sequel to this that came out last year, where you are more invited into the houses, whereas this one is mostly talking about the house from the outside. The next question is recommend a animal related book, and I've chosen Wilding, The Return of Nature to a British Farm by Isabella Tree. This has been everywhere, and I know that it's been on a lot of people's TBRs for the SpringAthon as well. But the reason I thought of this as animal is because it's all about rewilding a particular space of land, and the thing that really struck me in this book was how much wildlife came to the forefront when humans sort of took a step back and let nature take its own course. I think it asks a lot of important questions, especially to do with the idea of wildness and what that means, and how much we think is wild nature when in fact it's still quite controlled. This is an important book for the rewilding project of it, and to show that it is possible and what can happen when you let go of the control, but also I think it is helpful and insightful in the kind of questions that it provokes. So I really like this one. It is quite detailed in the statistics and things like that, but I think it's worthwhile in the end, so I would highly recommend it. The next question is recommend a book about water or related to water, and for that I have Spineless, The Science of Jellyfish and the Art of Growing a Backbone by Julie Perwold. So this is a book about jellyfish, and this is kind of quite science heavy, I would say, but I find that even though I didn't love the reading experience of this, and I think that the scientific lean and the melding of memoir and science isn't seamless, I think there's so much interesting information in this that it is worthwhile if you are interested in the subject. So this is talking about jellyfish in various ways. Like, for example, it talks about how studying jellyfish informs us about the change of climate change through the oceans and sort of the health of the water around us and water life or aquatic life. It talks about some of the biochemistry through studying jellyfish and their sting cells, which I thought was really interesting, especially sort of the overlap with cancer research and other medical research. There's things about some of the amazing qualities in jellyfish, much like with the octopus and their ability to camouflage and things like that, that I think is those kinds of information bits is the thing that usually draws me to reading about animals and reading natural history. For bird, I have chosen The Seabird Scribe by Adam Nicholson. This has been on my mind recently because I've read The Lightkeepers by Abby Jenai, where they talk about the seabirds and sort of some of the roughness and harshness of their living situation and behavior, sort of being inspired by the harsh climates that they live in, has been on my mind in connection with Abby Jenai's book. This book won the Wainwright Prize in 2018, and it was one of my favorites, if not the favorite of that year. The reason that this book is so strong is both, again, there is a critical discussion of the way that humans have negatively impacted the climate and ecosystems that affect birds in negative ways. For example, I'm fairly certain that there's a discussion about plastic, but also Adam Nicholson is a really poetic writer, and it fits so well with the topic of birds, I think. Combines beautiful writing with sharp insight. That is definitely my favorite kind of nature writing. And then the last recommendation question is recommend a book about travel. So I decided to go with an unusual one, and obviously not something that anyone will read for the SpringAthon because it's humongous. It is The Count of Monte Cristo by Alexandre Dumas. So this is a classic for a reason, so probably most of you already know what this one is about. Basically, it's a revenge drama, and it starts with a young man who sort of bound to be married, but then he is falsely accused of a crime that he didn't commit, and he is sent off to a prison, I think on an island, and it follows him breaking out from the prison and going on a journey for revenge. It's travel in all of the senses. Like, it's a physical travel because he does travel from the island to other locations to find the people responsible for his false accusation. But there's also the climbing of status through finding money and becoming someone of power. There's the sort of internal journey that he goes on, and the way that he changes through life circumstances and through the hurdles on the way. So I think this sort of it really works on all accounts for travel, and it is a fantastic book, and I will be reading this starting on Monday because I will be reading this with a book club on Voxer. So I really enjoyed this the first time I read it, so I'm really looking forward to returning to it. The next question is the book that you are most excited about that is on your TBR, and for that it is definitely Turning: Lessons from Swimming in Brilliant Lakes by Jessica Jaley, which will probably be a book that I start today, actually. It is on my SpringAthon TBR. I've been putting it to the side because I've been trying to concentrate on the ones that I've already started, but I have a feeling that I will just sort of crack and to start reading this tonight. It's a swimming memoir, which is something that I love, and this author is one that I've become increasingly interested in because she has a more recent book that has got really good reviews so far. The 8th question is the book that you're most excited about that you don't have access to yet. So for that, it is definitely Entangled Life by Merlin Sherlake. This is a book that has just come out, so I've actually pre-ordered this, so it should be arriving here in a few days, hopefully. But this book is all about fungi, and I am really excited about this book because it's written by a scientist. When I read nonfiction, I am always very keen to read books by people invested or working in the area that they are writing about, especially if you can tell that their job is their passion, and the passion that is something that they want to share. And I think it definitely seems like that is the case with this book. And this is one of the few books that is on fungi that is quite extensive. I've also read an interview between the author and Robert McFarlane on LitHub that I really enjoyed hearing the author reasoning around the topics of the book, and that made me even more eager for this one. So I will link the interview below in case you're interested and want to get sort of a sample of the author's thinking process behind the book. The 9th question is, why do you love nature writing? So there's no easy way to answer this, but I think first of all, reading nature writing, starting with Foxes on Earth, that was sort of the catalyst for me in becoming interested in nature nonfiction, especially. Made me interested in reading nonfiction in general, so that was sort of my entryway into enjoying and loving nonfiction. And at the time I was reading nonfiction, I was reading very few nonfiction books in comparison to my fiction reading. Now it's almost an exact 50-50 split, and I feel like finding nature nonfiction was my way in discovering so much of what was out there in terms of literature and publishing in general. So I really credit it a lot to breaking the ground for me. There's other things that is more sort of directly to do with the nature writing itself, like I find it calming, I find it often inspiring. I've always loved exploring nature, and I think I've sort of been able to reconnect with that side of myself from childhood, and especially my teens and young adult life. I don't think that I really tapped into that, and I feel like reading nature writing has allowed me to sort of connect with that side of myself again, and it has become a really central part of my everyday, but also learning about the world. And there's so much fascinating stuff, especially with the natural world. There's so much to learn, and that is, I think, the reason that I'm often drawn to natural history and sciencey side of nature writing, that there's so much information that I don't know about and that I find fascinating, and that changes the way that I think about the world. There's so many answers to this question, but I think generally I would say that nature writing enriches my life, both in a direct sense in the way that I look at the world, but also my reading life and how much I connect with it. So that is my rambly answer to this question. The 10th question is one of my favorite ones in this. It is, describe the nature around you. So I was particularly curious about what kind of nature people had access to, because for example, when I've been watching Jen Campbell's Instagram stories, she often shares her walks with her husband in the woods, and they see so many squirrels every day and foxes and things like that. And that got me thinking about the fact that squirrel sightings for me is quite rare. They do exist around me, but they are very shy, and they are the rare occasions throughout the year that sort of lightens up my day, but that isn't at all a daily thing. For me, the usual kind of nature that I see on a daily basis is birds, especially finches and tits, and the magpies and crows, pigeons, those kind of birds. that come to the bird feeder or that I see as I'm walking outside. There's also as I said, the rare occasion of squirrels in the trees outside my window. There are sometimes deer sightings. I did see a rat the other day, which isn't necessarily the kind of nature that I want to see close to houses, but it is a part of nature, part of life. The 11th question is shout out a channel that reads nature writing or a fellow nature writing lover, and for that I definitely wanted to mention Amy Anders. She is one of the booktubers that I connected with through our shared interest in nature. She has talked about a lot of nature writing books, both nonfiction and sort of fiction with nature elements in them. So I will link her channel below, and I would strongly recommend looking her up. So the people that I wanted to tag for this book tag is Amy Anders, of course, as I just mentioned, Julia's Book Time, Taking Tea with Catherine, and Andrea from Infinite Text, another nature lover that I discovered through our shared interest in nature. So that was all for this tag. I hope you've enjoyed SpringAthon if you've been participating, or even if you are just deciding to read nature writing for the rest of the month, like probably I will be doing, then I hope you enjoy whatever you are reading. If you've done this tag, feel free to link it below, or just share your answers to the questions in the comments. I would love to know. I hope you are doing well and that you're having a good Friday and weekend, and I will talk to you soon. Bye.